Ladies, I'm here with Katherine Metzelaar, and she is a registered dietitian and get this, a nutrition therapist, which I think is such a cool thing. She's going to tell you what exactly that means. But we're here to talk about how you can really negotiate life where you have the pressures of what it means to be a woman, what everyone's expecting of you, as well as all these things floating around your mind about what food should be, how we should eat, what we should do about food, how we should look. And really, how does that all come together with body image as well? So, Catherine's going to tell us about how we can really break free from that idea of perfectionism and this just really life overrun by rules when it comes to what we should be to be healthy. So I want to start off, first of all, hi, Catherine. And
Hi.
could you tell us what a nutrition therapist is? I think that's such a neat, different thing for everyone to hear about.
Yeah, so my full title is registered dietitian and nutrition therapist, and that really comes from the kind of work that I do. And so I identify as being a non-diet dietitian,
Love it.
and I provide medical nutrition therapy, which means that oftentimes I'm not just focusing on the do's and don'ts, if you will, of what you
Yeah.
should and shouldn't eat, but rather really diving into one's relationship with food and body, which really parallels with the therapy piece, right? It's
Yeah.
not just sort of the dietitian piece that we often
Yeah.
think of as sort of there's many things that we assume about what
Yeah.
dietitians are.
That's lovely. I like the idea of the non-diet dietitian. I think that should be on your business card. That's so cool. And that's been a common theme throughout everybody talking in this summit where we really, so many of us believe that the diet, yeah, the diets can work, but they're not necessarily sustainable for a healthy lifestyle, which is our goal here. It's what we're all gathered here to talk about. And thinking about diet in the way that it's supposed to be used, but it's not, really what you put in your mouth regularly. What do you recommend as, something that's sustainable? What is your typical recommendation for what we should eat?
Mm, that's such a great question, and one that I really get quite often. What I have noticed, at least, and if it's okay with you, I'll speak to what I've noticed with my clients and
Yeah,
in the work
please.
that I do, especially because I know this audience is overachieving women.
Yeah.
And what I've seen often is there's this tendency when maybe we have perfectionist leaning tendencies for that also to show up in our relationship with food and body,
Yeah.
right? So we're sort of go-getters and we're doing, maybe that means attending to our kids or attending to
Hmm.
the household or jobs, and we've got a lot going on.
Right.
And then this can sort of carry over into our relationship with food, this idea that we need to perfect it, that there's some sort of perfection.
Yes.
And that also relates to the way that we see our body too. And the reality is there's actually no such thing,
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
absolutely.
that's what we're told for most of our lives. And I would add to that too that being a woman, there's an additional pressure. We're told
Hmm.
from a very young
Oh,
age
yeah.
that our bodies are supposed to look and be a certain way,
Uh-huh.
and really stay the same for the entirety of our lives, which we know is not the case for women. That there
No.
are many changes that we
I
experience
know.
throughout a lifetime, whether that's starting with puberty, and then possibly if you're having children, and menopause, and then other changes that are sort of happening throughout the month. So I think there's a real tendency to go back to your point of this sort of do's and don'ts. What should I eat and not
Hmm.
eat? And let me see how I can perfect it, rather than working with and learning how to get to know your body and its needs in a new way.
Yeah. Well, you do work with intuitive eating. Could you tell us a little bit about how you recommend people get started with that?
Yeah, it's such a great question. So a great place really to begin is by reading the book if
Hmm.
someone is really interested in taking a deeper dive into that. Um, if someone is not ready to read the book, which is a fantastic read, and
Hmm.
I definitely recommend the intuitive eating book.
Yes.
There's a lot of Facebook groups that are open for the public that someone could get exposed to the ideas and principles There are a lot of
Yeah.
great blogs out there that introduce the principles as well. And the intuitive eating, the two women who created it made a workbook. And so that's a fun and
Oh,
easy way to get started.
yeah.
So it takes you through each one of the principles, and then it has just different exercises that you can do on your own. And then lastly, I would say seeking out a health practitioner that is a certified intuitive eating practitioner, which I am as well.
Yes. I mean, always look for help when you need it. If the book doesn't do it for you, the workbook doesn't do it for you, there are professionals who are experts in this who can guide you and can, kind of kick your butt a little bit when you start to move toward that perfectionist attitude. Because sometimes we need to, as we're moving away from that perfectionism, especially when it comes to our eating and our bodies and what we should be doing, should being such a bad word we've found in this summit.
Oh yeah.
We sometimes you need somebody just to give you a little perspective, and that may be a professional. It may be some buddies in one of these Facebook groups. But remember, you don't have to go at it alone. Women work great in
Absolutely.
community.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think, again, I've realized in the work, in my own work and working with clients, that there's really not many safe spaces, and I say that intentionally, for us to talk about the challenges that we have with food in our body.
Yeah,
And so, and that's part of the reason why I named my business what I did, which is Bravespace Nutrition,
yeah.
because I believe it takes an incredible amount of bravery just to show up in that space. But once people get there, I really see some real healing happen, and just being able to talk about where sort of the roadblocks are, and the
Right,
challenges are for folks with, in particular, women with their body and their
right.
relationship with food.
How do you how do you recommend your clients, or even with yourself or others you've seen? How do you recommend breaking away from that mindset of the perfectionism and the rules? Because at least for me, I'm a recovered anorexic, so that was very hard for me to do. And some of us believe that if we don't follow the rules, don't follow the process, that we're not going to see results. We're not going to get where we want. How do you kind of allay those fears with people who feel that way?
Yeah, so it's such a great point that you bring up, and such a valid fear, one that I see quite often. And what I'll say first is, I work in eating disorders, and I
Mm-hmm.
also work with folks with disordered eating, chronic dieters.
Yeah.
And to begin that conversation, what I will say is there's this idea that when we get to X weight, or
Mm-hmm.
when we perfect our diet in said way, then we will then feel a certain way. We will feel
Right.
um, connected. We'll have romantic partnership. We will feel great and be smiling and galloping through a field.
Right.
So
Right.
whatever, that's an exaggeration.
But, not totally.
Yeah. So there's this idea that we will achieve and be what we think in our head when we get to this imaginative
Right.
place. And what we know, and this may be the lived experience for a lot of your listeners, and I've also experienced this, and I see this with my clients too, which is when we get there, that's not usually the case,
Right.
right? In
Right.
terms of on the far end of things, when we're being quite restrictive, when we've gotten to the ideal weight that we wanted to get to, there's a lot of costs that come with that. It might be
Yeah.
isolation, excuse me,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and that we may not get all the things that we had imagined. And so, what I really work on with my clients, and what I suggest is, how can we start doing the things that you desire in that future
Mm-hmm.
you right now,
I
because
like that.
right because I'm sure, and I would be interested to hear from you, but I can
Mm-hmm.
again speak to my experience, which is it's not the way that we thought it would be once we get to where we think we should be going, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't have that same sort of feeling of joy, and I want to add one more thing as I'm sort of talking through this, that we are told too from media and messaging
Mm-hmm.
that that's what we're going to feel like, right? That
Right.
the goal should always be that we should be working towards being smaller,
Right.
that our focus should be on our body and our beauty and all the
Mm-hmm.
things, and and because of that, then we'll be sort of happy and sexy and
Right. Rich and famous.
successful, right?
Life's perfect.
Yeah.
And that's not to discount, of course, if you get to a healthier place, you probably will feel more confident. You might feel a little bit better. That's not to discount the things that can come from setting goals and reaching them. It's just that sometimes there are other things that aren't addressed. We tend to see more of the research, the psychological research, in people who have weight loss surgery or like huge amounts of weight loss, where they feel like everything's going to get better, but suddenly they realize that there were lots of issues that actually caused them to be that size that weren't taken care of. Now, those are extreme examples, of course, but when we hang all of our hopes and dreams and future on some essentially arbitrary number to get to, there might be some disappointment. And, again, that's not to say don't set goals and, achieve them, but look at the whole picture.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And we as women don't exist in bubbles, right?
Right.
It's not quite as simple, even though we're told that in the dieting culture that we exist in, that it's really quite easy. It's sort of black and white and there's a lot of dichotomies. Right. But the reality is we're busy and we've got a lot going on, and it's not quite like that. There's so many things that have influenced our relationship with food, our relationship with our own bodies.
Yep.
And then how that carries over into our relationships with other people in our life, and can influence how we show up and how liberated we feel as women to live our most authentic lives.
Yes, because there's so much of ourselves, men or women, this is not necessarily a woman thing, but so much of our self concept is hooked up in our physical selves. And, it's hard to remember, since, we live in this world as physical bodies. Sometimes it's hard to remember that, that you need to think about who you are inside too. That it's not just your outside. Sure, that's part of it, but there's more to it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's why in this work it's so important. One of the tools that I teach and that we work on is building resilience and creating self-compassion for ourselves. Yeah. Because what we often realize in the process is there's these things that sort of repeat in our minds, and they're quite critical and quite mean often. That voice that sort of says, you're not doing enough, you're not good enough, you're not skinny enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not, and it can be different things for different people. Yeah. And the work is really sort of uncoupling that. What is actually going on, and how can we begin to introduce self-compassion into this process of learning how to have a new relationship with food and your body?
Absolutely. But there's communication research from years ago. Like, this is generally accepted that whatever you are saying in your mind, you talk it into reality. And it's not anything magic. It's just that you start to believe your own story, and then you start to act out your own story. It's not law of attraction or magic or anything. It's, psychological. You start to believe what you tell yourself. And so why are you telling yourself these horrible things? Be nice to yourself. Be compassionate, because you sure as heck wouldn't say that to somebody you love. So why say it to yourself?
Yeah, and I see that be a really profound moment. That's often what I recommend, sort of in the work that when I'm doing in one-on-one sessions. And this could be something for your audience to ask themselves a question on their own is, how would you talk to someone that you love in your life? For some folks, this is their child. For others, it's their partner, maybe a parent. How would you speak to them? And that can be a really powerful moment, because what we realize is the voice that we have going on in our mind is quite mean. It's quite negative.
It's very.
And to your point, we wouldn't say that to someone that we really love.
Well, and we also find with women like us who are really like constantly achieving, constantly moving forward, that voice easily goes from, like, come on, let's do it, the motivator, to, come on, stupid, why aren't you doing that? You're so lazy. Why are you so fat? And stuff that you're just like, why would you say that to yourself? You wouldn't say that to anybody. And if someone said that to you, you'd be angry, right?
Yes.
But we say it to ourselves as a motivation. But what is that motivating? That's terrible.
Yeah. I mean, the first step is really realizing what's going on. I say in the process that we can't change something that we're not aware of. So being aware of it. And then beyond that, this idea that we can't hate ourselves into loving ourselves.
Oh,
that this degrading right, this sort of degrading mantras really is what they are that we continue
Yeah.
to have on repeat. And sometimes we don't even realize they're happening. I'm pointing back here
Yeah.
because it's sort of what I imagine the old time sort of film reels that are just
Yes.
sort of going and going on auto replay. Is that it's not coming from a loving, compassionate place. It's actually coming from a quite mean and negative place, and it's very
Yeah.
hard to move beyond that if that's sort of on replay all the time.
Right. And that's so, we think that that's what's pushing us forward, that we need that inner drill sergeant who's actually just a really nasty drill sergeant back there.
Yeah.
And you can succeed by flipping the script and encouraging yourself and giving yourself a break sometimes. You're not going to suddenly fall into mediocrity, which, it's a fear that a lot of us have. That if you let down your guard, that perfectionism, that set of rules, that voice in your head, that you're going to suddenly be average. And you know what? None of you here are built to be average. So you're already ahead of the game. You don't need to be angry and mean to yourself.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so common, right? To the point earlier that sometimes we don't even realize that it's on replay all the
Yes,
time.
yes.
I'd say one of the ways to start exploring this is really just to get curiously with compassion, right? So
Yeah,
um, a simple way is just sort of asking yourself that question, like, what isn't that interesting?
yeah,
What's going on in my mind? Isn't that what's happening? Rather than sort of saying like I should stop this and this
right.
isn't okay. Just really bringing in that element of curiosity,
Yeah,
which can start to sort of shine a light on what's actually happening and the messaging that we have on repeat to ourselves.
yeah. And if you're not ready to be very nice to yourself, that's a good first step. Just say, "Isn't that interesting?" and think about it. You're built with an analytical mind here. You can do that on yourself too. And thinking about, why am I saying that? Why is that my continual script? That's a more palatable next step than just suddenly saying, "You're great. You look awesome." Because, that's good too. But
Yeah.
it's not as easy as it sounds.
Yeah, yeah, and it's quite interesting because there's a lot of messaging around body positivity now. And
Yeah.
while I do a lot of body image work, um, I often say the goal is to get to body neutrality. To your point, that it's
Yes.
the reality is that we are going to have good body days and bad body days,
Oh,
but the
yeah.
goal is to see it, to say, okay, there's my cellulite, or
Hmm.
there's that role that I don't
Yeah.
like, and I'm feeling really frustrated and distressed about, and then we move on from it, right? That
Right.
it doesn't affect how we're eating or how we're moving. That it's just an acknowledgement,
Right.
and that we continue living our most liberated lives, um,
Right.
even in the context of the days that we're not feeling so great about ourselves.
Right. And, that doesn't mean you can't then say, "There's that role again." And, you can choose to move on. I mean, right now, that role is not going away. If you are that invested in getting rid of that role, you can say, "Okay, what do I want to do?" That's, you can objective. The goal is to be objective here. You don't need to pass judgment on yourself all the time. And I love that term, body neutrality, because body positivity is something that a lot of us just look at and go, "Ugh," because that's like saying, "So I'm just supposed to accept this?" And no, no, no. I mean, it's about giving yourself a break, observing it, being
Mm-hmm.
objective, and if you want to do something, cool. If not, also cool.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. And again, there's this continuous message that we're fed as women in this culture, which is that your body is never good enough as it is,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
No matter
frustrating.
where you are in your life cycle, that there should always be something that you should be striving for to change, and that it's just not good enough. And so it
Yes,
can be quite challenging to break out of that when you are facing a culture that's constantly telling you you're not good enough.
exactly. There's a Britney Spears song, and I can't believe I'm quoting Britney here, but there's a song that she sings called "Piece of Me," and it's talking about how, like, she says one line, "She's too fat, now she's too thin," where it's like even Britney couldn't get away from criticism. And if you live in this constant, what am I supposed to be? What do I need to look like? Even a pop star can't get away from it. So, just be nice to yourself. Don't worry. I mean, you're going to worry to some degree what other people think of you, but there's always going to be something, you're too this, you're not enough that. And oh, you're pregnant, you're not gaining enough weight. Oh, you've gained too much weight. Oh, you're working out while you're pregnant. Oh, you're not working out. Or it's exhausting and we can't live like that. It's not sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I would add to that too that it really distracts us, number one, and
Yeah.
detracts from us living our most liberated
Yes.
lives.
Oh
Right?
my
Think
gosh,
about all the
yes.
time that we spend thinking about how we're going to change our body and how we need to perfect our
Yes.
food. And if we could allocate even a portion of that to the things that we really feel passionate about, um, wow, what a
Yeah.
world we might live in. And I actually hear that with my clients, that with time as we work together, that they're shocked with the amount of time that they have because they're
Yeah.
not constantly thinking about food and dieting and their body in the same way. So through intuitive eating, as we do the work, and really a lot of it is about unlearning what we've
Hmm.
learned. Um, that they are shocked with all this time that they have because
That's so
their
cool.
headspaces are being taken up.
That's so cool because once you just, like you said, living your most liberated life, I that makes me even just kind of feel a little bit relieved even thinking about living a liberated life where you don't have to have this constant voice in your head. You don't have to always be perfecting something or how do I eat even better? How do I exercise even more or look better or fight aging? Just God, that's so tiring and it takes up so much brain space.
Oh yes, so much brain space, so much. I don't even think we realize, and I think again that's why this work can be so powerful because all of a sudden we realize, wow, if we think about it in terms of a pie,
Yeah,
how much of that pie in a day in terms of headspace are we actually thinking about
yeah,
food in our body? And for most people, when they start, it's 90%, 100%.
yeah,
And then with time, the pie gets, smaller and smaller. And it doesn't mean that it completely disappears, but yes, absolutely. It takes up a tremendous amount of
yeah,
space in our head, which takks away from what that space could be used to be doing other things that
yeah.
we like doing.
That was something that was just like a huge revelation for me in recovery from anorexia. Just how other people, once I realized other people don't have a pie chart that looks like pretty much all I'm thinking about food. I was like, you can live like that? Seriously, you can? And then first that realization that you don't have to always be vigilant about your health or your body or what's going on. You do need some awareness, but once I realized, oh my God, other people don't think like this, and it's possible not to think about this all the time. Of course, it's a little bit harder if you have an actual disorder, but so the rest of you, I hope the majority of this population does not have that. But trying to move from that, like, oh my God, what am I eating? I'm hungry. Should I eat? No, I shouldn't eat. Oh, I should really get up and exercise. And you're right. Once you can clear some of that out, devote more of the pie chart to other things you want to accomplish in life, you're not suddenly gonna your body's not gonna go to hell. It's not like you're just letting go of everything. That's it's a tough concept for a lot of us who are so used to tightly controlling things so we can succeed.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think there's a couple of things that came to mind when you were talking through that. One was the fear piece of sort of this
Mm-hmm.
idea that if we lean into trusting our body more, that we'll turn into these sort of uncontrolled beings and
Yeah,
we'll eat ourselves into oblivion.
yeah,
And what we know in terms of the literature that supports intuitive eating, which there's a lot at this point, there's over 80 scientific studies that have come out
yeah,
now related to intuitive eating, that with time, intuitive eaters actually learn how to be in touch with our body's internal
yes,
cues. The process is really learning to not let the external influences
yeah,
influence what we're eating and how we're moving, and to sort of cue into that. And what we've seen with that process is that people end up eating less because they're more tuned with what their
yeah,
body needs, and really how they move through the day, right? What they're
right,
needing and in what way they're needing it, rather than saying, okay, I've eaten my allotted amount of food, or I haven't worked out, so I don't deserve to eat, and all the other sort
Right.
of rules that we might create in our minds.
Yeah. I mean, what freedom by just listening to your body and letting it do what it's supposed to. Just what incredible freedom. And the outcome being that you really reached that goal you were trying to reach while you were being so hyper vigilant. And you can devote that thought to something else
Mhm.
instead of, oh, it's 6 o'clock, I should have dinner.
Right, right. Or it's 8 o'clock and I shouldn't have dinner
Right,
anymore because
exactly.
I need to. Right.
Rules, rules, rules.
Yeah, right, exactly. And it's interesting when I often talk about the work that I do in terms of intuitive eating. I say, on the baseline, it's just about eating when you're hungry for the
Yeah.
most part, and stopping when you're full, um, and and people say, oh, okay, I've got that.
Yeah.
And the reality is, it's not, because we are all naturally born intuitive eaters, and at some point
Right.
that is taken away from us, right? So
Right.
and it's not always with malintentions, but it usually comes from our family of origin, maybe family dynamics,
Mm-hmm.
or it could have been because of a diet that we were put on a young
Yeah.
age. There's many reasons. And so learning how to get back in touch with the intuitive eater within us it takes some time, right? And we
Yeah.
think about the amount of time that we've spent maybe trying to control and trying to diet.
Mm-hmm.
That it can also take some time to again, going back to that unlearning piece and uncoupling piece, and really getting back in touch with what is my body asking for, and how can I honor
Yes.
that.
How do we get started on that? Intuitive eating sounds so easy, but like you're saying, it's not just, oh, listen to my body, got it. What are the first few steps that we can take to start unlearning and start paying attention?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say there's a couple of things. In some ways, you are the company that you keep. So an
Mm-hmm.
interesting first step is paying attention to what you're surrounded by, right? So
Yeah.
how many of your friends or your family are eating and moving in a particular way?
Mm-hmm.
Looking at your social media exposure. So a lot of
Oh.
the work that I do is doing something called a social media cleanse or detox, which I don't use that
Ah.
because I'm a non-diet dietitian,
Yeah.
except for in that context, which is really the process of paying attention to the exposure that we get, because it can seem quite small.
Yeah.
But if we're on our phones often, which many of us are,
Of
that's the
course.
reality of how our lives are now. Is looking at what is coming in,
Mm-hmm.
right, and starting there as a starting point.
Yeah. I like that because things that seem inspirational or even aspirational sometimes, like that that woman who can always get every crazy yoga pose out on a beach and somehow she's making money off of this, from that girl you follow to certain diets like you're in a Whole30 group, or everywhere you see there's no, you've used cleanse and detox in ways that I am okay with. But when it comes to like a diet, to do a cleanse or a detox, we see those words everywhere, which, when you see that all the time, it it becomes part of your brain. And what media you consume with TV, with magazines, with everything around you, you're right, it builds your world, and what comes into your brain is very important. I think that's actually kind of a novel way for you to start out with them. I don't know any other RDs or people in the profession who start out that way with what's going on inside.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to your point, we exist in a dieting culture,
Yeah.
and while it might not seem like that when we're sort of starting to, I can get curious about our environment. What
Mm-hmm.
what are people talking about? How are they talking about food? What am I
Yeah.
following on social media? That you're right, we're constantly being told, whether it's subliminal or overt,
Mm-hmm.
that we should be sort of going on a new diet or a cleanse or sort of a Whole30
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah, I
When
just pulled that one
um,
out of thin air.
right,
Nothing against Whole30. I just pulled that one out.
right. But this idea that's what we should be doing,
Right.
right? And then
Right.
you mentioned sort of seeing this person that is perfect,
Yeah.
right, on a beach, but what we don't see is the reality of their actual lived
Right.
experience, right? So we
Exactly.
don't see the the photographers that might be behind it, and
Yeah.
the fact that they maybe were skipping meals and not eating leading up
Right.
to that photo shoot, and that we don't really know them and what their lived experience is, whether or not they're maybe experiencing depression or anxiety,
Right.
or social isolation because of the way that they're eating. There's so many things that we don't see, and
Right.
yet, even though the literature shows that we know that there's airbrushing and there's
Yes.
sort of this staged experience, our brain still sees it as reality,
Yep.
and
Which
so
is
that's
amazing research.
yeah. So that's why it's really important, even in the beginning, that we sort of take
Mm-hmm.
a critical look at what we're choosing, because we can't control everything that we're
Right.
exposed to, but the things that we can, then we start to examine, is this, and getting really curious, is this helping me to be my best, most
Mm-hmm.
authentic self, and to create a new relationship with myself and my body,
Yes.
or is it distracting me and kind of throwing me off my center?
Absolutely. So, what do we do after we've identified really what is surrounding us, our environment? So, the people we keep, we spend our time with, the company you keep, and the media we consume, mostly social media, because that's, they look like regular Joes, but they're not. What do you do next? How do we use that information?
Yeah, it's a great question. So what I would say is that the journey and the principles of intuitive eating serve as a wonderful guide in terms of the process that you
Mm-hmm.
take. And so I start with, and I encourage um, folks to start here, which is ditching the diet mentality. That's the first
Yes.
principle of intuitive eating.
Yes.
And there's many insidious ways that dieting can show up in our life.
Hmm.
Ways that it's sort of promoted as healthy living,
Yeah.
or healthy lifestyles, when really it's a diet. I mean, we
Right.
mentioned cold turkey as being an example. There's the paleo diet and keto
Yep.
diet, and sort of cleansing and restricting just generally.
Right.
The first step in this process is giving that up. And this is not to say
Mm-hmm.
that there's any judgment for folks that are maybe following that and doing that. It's just that if we want to explore our relationship with food and start to do it in a
Right.
slightly different way, then we need to give that up.
Exactly. And if these diets, diet in quote, essentially ways of eating, paleo, low carb, Mediterranean, whatever it is, if that works for you, that's fine. When we're talking, if you're looking at weight loss, the literature has repeatedly shown that it doesn't matter what diet or eating plan you're on. If you eat less and move more, you lose weight. So if that's what you're trying to do, liberate yourself, release the fear, because you can get to that many ways. But just living, just trying to be without a weight loss goal, without some eating restriction of some sort because of an allergy or whatever, you can essentially just find what works. And I like your idea of just releasing the need to follow something structured. There's no need for that unless you really like it, if it works for you.
Right. And I would say, for folks that maybe are pursuing a particular kind of diet
Mm-hmm.
and have no challenges with it, right? Aren't experiencing any distress in the name of their diet, that they probably wouldn't be coming to see someone like
Yeah.
me. But what I see in my work with my clients is that oftentimes dieting does cause a tremendous amount of distress.
Yes.
And when they can't follow it, or when they gain the weight back, which usually is the case, that they blame themselves, right? That they didn't
Absolutely.
do it hard enough or perfect enough. And I also see in my work, and this has been shown in the literature too, that restricting can often lead to binging, which
Yes.
then leads to shame, then leads to restriction, right? So we do
Yep.
this restrict binge cycle,
Oh, the shame cycle.
right?
It shows up everywhere, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We love it.
Yeah, exactly. And yet we're continuously told, which is a great business model, to be completely
Yeah,
honest,
it is.
um, from diets that, well, do it again and do it harder,
Yeah.
right? So then it sort of leads us into maybe trying something else and then trying something else. And
Hmm.
then we get to this point where we're really quite paralyzed by all of it. And,
Yeah.
and there's this accumulation of rules. And if we're already overachieving
Uh-huh.
women, or we already have perfectionist tendencies, that can really lead us to this place of real confusion. Where do I
Yes.
start? Where do I begin? What do I eat? What do I not eat? And so part of the work that I do is helping people to understand that.
Yeah, to get out of that paralysis where it's just like you don't, whether it's weight loss or just being healthy, the rules are really simple. Eat what works for you. And if you're trying to lose weight, eat a little less of it. I mean, it's really not that hard. And we try to make it so difficult because that's how people in the industry make money. And, be aware of that. If there is a diet that works for you that you really just you're feeling it, if you are just living the paleo lifestyle, cool. But if it's not working for you, remember, liberate yourself, baby.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it can be challenging to uncouple a lot of
Yeah.
these things and unlearn these things that we have been taught, right? And it's
Yeah.
not to say that that there isn't space for all of it,
Yeah.
um, but in the pursuit of sort of understanding where we are in this moment and what our lived experience
Hmm.
has been in our body,
Yeah.
and how our relationship with food has developed, because there's, as I mentioned earlier, there's so many things that can
Oh,
influence
yeah.
it, um, that that it can take time. It really can
Yeah.
take time.
Your approach is such a breath of fresh air where, just look at all the things influencing you. Think about what's what is really resonating with you, with what you want to be. How does your body work? And you can't just prescribe a way of being healthy. There is no one path. And I like that you start out with helping people figure out, what's gotten me to this place? What are the influences in my life? What am I thinking? And then find your own path. I think it's the only way to really get to that freedom, that ability to have your resilience and your positive self-image and all of that, and to, you know, forge your own path, which sounds hard because a lot of us are like, "Oh my god, just tell me what to do." And,
Right, right,
unfortunately, we can't just tell you what to do. That's I'd like
right.
that too. If someone could just tell me what to do, that would be cool. But
Yeah,
it just unfortunately doesn't work like that.
yeah. And I think that, to be completely transparent, I think that's part of what is included in the diet culture,
Yeah.
right? That we're
Yeah.
told that it's sort of black and white, and
Just
what
do
we know
this.
about, right, exactly, and what we know about humans, is that it's not like that. That
Yeah.
our lives aren't like that, and so understanding our story is really
Right.
important. The story of our body, what it's been through, what it's
Yes.
experienced, um, and also in terms of our relationship with food, right? That
Yeah.
that what works well for one person might not work well for another person, and how do we begin to know that from the inside out rather from the outside in?
Oh, I love that. Oh, I love it. We can write just end on that. That's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for your advice and for really helping us figure out how to be kind to ourselves and just, listen to your body and your mind and understand who you are without that judgment.
Oh, you're welcome. It was really, really my pleasure. I really enjoyed talking today, and it was a real pleasure for me.
Thank you. And everybody, I'm going to include a link to where you can read about intuitive eating. You can see the book that Catherine was talking about. So thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.